Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. It's me, Spear, and today I have for you the best midfielders for the upcoming Fantasy Premier League 2024-2025 season. I've got all the best stats for you, the fixtures to focus on, and my favourite picks also at every price point. Those are my ranks on the left if you're new to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. In terms of points changes, there's none at the base level, but for BPS, midfielders are going to benefit a lot more from winning fouls. So Gordon and Saka, for example, win a lot of fouls, and shots on target as well. So anyone who's an accurate and regular shooter will also gain from that. If they do one or both of those, it means they're more likely to get bonus points. Okay, so just to note, the ones in yellow are bonus point production rather than base points. In terms of base points, it's exactly the same as last year. What that means, if you're newer to the game or you're wanting to focus more on what's important, they do actually gain a point for a clean sheets, of course, midfielders versus forwards who don't. And they also gain an extra point for a goal versus forwards who only gain 4 points for a goal. All stats for today's video are non-penalty based, so won't be skewed by that. This means that, you know, if Chelsea, for example, got 8 to 10 penalties last season and Fulham only got 1, it's not massively skewed the data. However, I've still highlighted when players are the penalty taker for their club in blue, and that will mean that obviously the goal involvement is going to be a lot higher than what you're seeing on screen come the end of the season, likely, okay? Also note that when I say games for a club, when I'm speaking over the information, over the data you're seeing, I've averaged it out to equate to 90 minutes. So if a player's played, for example, 8 90-minute games and 2 45s, other creators might say that's 10 games. For me, that's 9 games, right? Because it's 8 45s, 8 90s and 2 45s. So I think that's a much better for understanding goal involvement. You'll also see minutes on the right hand side, which is different to that. Minutes is something I've taken a long time to calculate, and what I've gone through and done is looked at total minutes in the league for the club, looked at the amount of starts, gone and looked at individual games where they've made sub appearances, calculated the sum of those, subtracted that from the total minutes that they've actually played that season in the league, and then divided by the number of starts. So what you're actually seeing there, the TLDR, is the average minutes per start for that player, okay? If it's in bold, that section, it means either they've started every game they're available for or only missed maybe 1 or 2, okay? The usual stats are there as well, and they're all very important. So XGI is the expected goal involvement. So in terms of goals and assists total per 90, all these stats on here are per 90. Goal involvement is their actual output versus what their expected was, so that's their actual quality. And then I've further specified it to expected goals versus expected assist. And obviously XG is what we're looking for across all positions. If it's a high XA versus XG, that's not as good as a high XG versus XA. You can also see how clinical they are and what their final product is like in terms of that goals and assists as well there. So let's get the most boring one out of the way. First of all, is the 15th man of the squads. So that's for most people playing a 3-4-3, of course. Nominee for Australian PFA Player of the Year is Massimo Luongo, and he has 3 goals, no assists in 35 90s for Ipswich last season in the Championship. His whole career average is a 0.2 goal involvement per 90. Harry Winks, for example's career average is 0.05 goal involvement per 90. So 4 times worse than Luongo's. Though you could argue Winks' place is much safer. Luongo may offer a bit more going forward, potentially. If Ipswich don't sign another centre mid, I would go with Luongo. If they do sign another centre mid, I'd probably go with Winks. Okay? For now, I'm on Luongo. Sangara is the only other starter at 4.5, or likely starter at 4.5. 0 attacking returns in 12 games. I wouldn't bother with him personally. So for me, Luongo, based upon his attacking potential and his lower ownership versus the casually and high-owned Harry Winks, means he's the winner for me, and it's also more likely that I'd want free Leicester versus free Ipswich as well. if some things I forgot to mention as well when I'm explaining some of these stats is if they're highlighted in green, that's sort of my picks from the bracket. If I had to pick someone from the bracket, if they have an asterisk next to their name, that means that their stats are not from the Premier League or not from last season's Premier League. Sangare in yellow, for example, is a warning. So anyone in yellow is a warning that I don't think they're the best pick in that position, and I'm warning you against picking them, either due to value or other issues. But I'm including them because I know they're popular or I know they're starters at that bracket. 5 million midfielders, and this is a bracket I wouldn't bother with at all. 4.5 million I would, because you can put him as your 15th man. 5 million I wouldn't bother. I'd rather go 0.5 extra for 5.5 mids. However, there are some options. 18-year-old Ghanaian winger Ibrahim Osman tops the 5 million list with 6 goals, 7 assists, the 13 goal involvements in 23 games in the Danish Super League last season, and now has had his 16 million transfer to Brighton. It's difficult to see whether those stats transition to the Prem and how many minutes he gets, because he's vying with Pedro, Mitoma, Buonanotte, March, Adingra, Minte for one of those attacking slots. So I do worry for his minutes, and for that reason I've highlighted him with a caution. I just wanted him to include him because he does actually have the best goal involvement numbers of any 5 million asset that may be starting. As you can see, even in the Danish Super League, even with sub appearances adjusted for, his expected minutes is really poor. So I am warning against you on this one, but he could be one to watch. Burns for Ipswich looks like a more assured starter. Again, not the best minutes though. 6 goals, 4 assists, so 10 goal involvements in 26 games last season for Ipswich. He seems to have dropped off a little season by season, and with the gulf in quality between Championship and Premiership, I see that even more so for him. He should start now. For me, he's not worth it, although his minutes and stats are okay for the price. And for me, in terms of reliability, he's probably the second best option in the 5 million bracket, just above Osman and Diallo, but I just don't think he's worth it at all. I expect a large fall off from him as he goes into the Premier League with Ipswich. Diallo will be a popular pick in the game. Manchester United players generally pick up a lot of percentage ownership in FPL due to the popularity of the club worldwide. Diallo stats, I know he has stats from last season for the Premier League, but there's such a small data set that I think it's pointless. He did have 1 goal, 1 assist in around 490 minutes, or the equivalent of that for United last season. Instead, what I've pulled here is his most recent stats for Sunderland, where he had 16 goal involvements in 29 games for Sunderland, which is quite impressive, but obviously it's not in the Premier League. He should start the season for United and plays Fulham at home in the first game of the season, but he's a super short-term pick. I can't see him keeping Rashford out of the team. I can't see him even keeping Anthony or Sancho out of the team, though I would personally be playing him over Anthony. But all 3 of those, plus Garnacho on the other wing, I can't see him not losing minutes. So it's a no for me, unless you plan to wildcard very early, and it's the position which United needs strengthening anyway. Morgan Rogers already is the most popular pick, I would say, in the sort of Twitter sphere and FPL sphere for the 5 million bracket, and I actually think he is my favourite pick. 3 goals, 1 assist, so 4 goal involvements in 7 games or 790s. In my opinion, is the other option for Burns in this bracket. Maybe slightly worse minutes and expected starts versus Burns, but a much better team and better player. He does have a lot of threat for his position, even despite Moussa Diaby leaving. But with Moussa Diaby leaving, that's why he's quite an interesting pick here. If you need someone, I would go with him, but I'd much rather save 0.5 and have a perma bench or fine 0.5 and go up to the next bracket, which brings us on nicely to the 5.5 mids. And this is a very, very interesting bracket to look through. So we have Minte, who has gathered a lot of steam, not only in the FPL world, but in the general footballing world for his performances in the pre-season and for Feyenoord last season. 12 goal involvements, including 10 goals in 1690s for Feyenoord in the Eredivisie. He looks like a fantastic punt for the price. if you can get over Brighton's dodgy fixtures. I really don't like those first 3 fixtures for Brighton. But he probably, you know, he is worth a punt if you're the type of player who wants to do that sort of thing and wants to punt on new signings, and that's your style of play as an FPL manager in this game. So he does have a green highlight for me, but remember the asterisks. Those stats are from the Eredivisie. Is he really going to have a 0.77 goal involvement per 90 in the Premier League? I doubt it. I would love it if he did, but I doubt it. I also worry for his minutes as well, despite being arguably the star signing for Brighton this summer. His minutes, even for Feyenoord, when I've removed sub appearances, is awful. 69 minutes average start. So I worry for that. And for me, I don't like having players with a low expected minutes. Okay. Next up is Murphy for Liverpool. And Murphy's preseason has been quite incredible, really. That right wing spot looks like his to lose, but threat from Barnes, threat from Almiron, and rumoured new signings for Newcastle means it's in a void from me. But he has the fixtures, and he should be starting at least to start the season. And if he can nail down that right wing, then he looks really good value. I do really worry for his minutes, because even if they don't sign anyone, I'm sure Almiron and Barnes will get minutes, especially Barnes, in my opinion. Leicester City's star midfielder, attacking midfielder Fatawu, is easily the best option for Leicester. That's in spite of Mavridi's set pieces. So even with Mavridi's set pieces, Fatawu has better stats. And Mavridi's not on penalties. That'll be Vardy if he starts. Everything goes through Fatawu. If you watch him pre-season or you watched any of Leicester last year, everything really goes through him, and they really rely on him. You can see he has really good or really decent minutes as well. His output's pretty great, but remember, that's championship stats. That's my only gripe with Fatawu in this bracket is the fact he plays for Leicester, really, and the fact that his stats are going to drop off with that transition from the Championship to the Premier League. Next up is another green, and that is Anthony Elanga, the former United and Sweden man. He looks like a standout option at 5.5. He has better XGI stats than Callum Hudson-Odoi, than Cho, and Morgan Gibbs-White, MGW, with great fixtures for Nottingham Forest. I really like this pick. My only worry is the manager for this pick. Nuno Espirito Santo, I'm not a massive fan of. And if you look through his data last season and his minutes for Elanga, he gets hooked randomly for players that don't even play in his position. That's my only worry for Anthony Elanga. So if you pick him, especially based off my video, this is a big warning for you. His minutes are a risk. So despite his minutes per start being good, he can randomly get rotated and benched and subbed. So I do think those expected minutes, those average minutes per 90 with starts is quite inflated there for Elanga, and that's my only worry for him. Everything else looks really good for him for this price bracket. At Ipswich, I was comparing Chaplin and Hutchinson. Hutchinson's minutes, when you include sub-appearances, on average is 50. And he had worse stats just versus Chaplin, so it's an easy pick of Chaplin over Hutchinson if you want an Ipswich midfielder. I just wanted to show you justification for that. I don't like the pick personally, but he should start, and he has decent involvement. It's fine, but not for me. Just showing you him, really. Doucouré kind of follows suit for me. And again, just to show you stats, and also to show you that he's my pick over McNeil if you did want an Everton midfielder. I don't know why you'd want an Everton midfielder, but he is my pick over McNeil. He has significantly better XG than McNeil. McNeil only wins in expected assists and his creativity, but Doucouré is more advanced, more central, much bigger threat. So if you do want an Everton mid, he's there. I wouldn't go there. Next on the list is Andreas Pereira, and he's the first penalty taker on the list. He's the first penalty taker on the list. So those stats are going to be a lot better next season, because Fulham should get more penalties than they did last season. They didn't get many last season. And I think he's a very interesting pick. My worry for him is his minutes. He gets subbed early a lot. And despite starring for Brazil and having, really good consistent seasons for Fulham now in the Premier League, I worry for his minutes a little bit, but he has phenomenal fixtures. He has penalties and set pieces. He's in the Fulham side on the up. He's a really nice little pick there, and he's one of my highlight picks for this price bracket. The only reason I've put in Emil Smith-Rowe's data is to show you that Pereira's is better. And this is from Smith-Rowe's, as you can see with the asterisks, is best season in 2021-22. And even then, Pereira's expected stats are actually better than Smith-Rowe's. Though his actual output, Smith-Rowe's was better. But Smith-Rowe's been injured on and off for 2 to 3 seasons now. 2 seasons now. And I just wanted to show you that it's just not the way. It's the kind of sort of Emil Smith-Rowe for FPL players, FPL managers, is kind of the more flair pick, but nothing really backs it up. Not the stats. If you look at last couple of seasons, barely played, and his stats aren't that great in the past couple of seasons. I've had to pull stats from 3 years ago to even compare him to Pereira. He's been injured. He's not been he's at a new side. So yeah, for me, it's a wait and see for Smith-Rowe. Just go for Pereira for now if you want a Fulham midfielder. Next up is Semenyo for Bournemouth, and I think this is one of the best price and position players in terms of changes FPL Towers have made. I don't think he's one of the best picks, but in terms of what they've done to tempt us into picking him is very good. They've positioned him as a midfielder, and they've priced him at 5.5. Those are 2 very good things, but as you can see, his expected goal involvement is quite low last year. And he way overperformed on it, really. Minutes are a little bit of a risk as well, because Iraola does like to rotate that free behind Solanke. One of the reasons I've put him in here is to show you this. First of all, to show you the stats, because he's a popular option. But also, if Solanke leaves to join Spurs, which could happen, Semenyo suddenly becomes a very, very interesting pick, because he'll effectively be the star man in the attack, because he's the second best attacker for Bournemouth, in my opinion, by quite a distance. So if Solanke leaves, then Semenyo looks very, very interesting. If he doesn't, it's a not bother at all. If he does, is a consideration, but Bournemouth's fixtures aren't the best, that's all. So for now, he's a warning. I wouldn't bother with him unless we get transfer news. Kamada, I'll talk about Hudson-Odoi in a second. Kamada for Palace has done well in the pre-season for Palace. But his stats in Serie A last season just weren't very good. His minutes, even when you include sub-appearances as well, poor. I just wouldn't bother with him. I just think there's better options, more reliable and more proven options at this price bracket. You just don't need to bother with Kamada. And most people will be going with Eze as well, and no one wants to double up with him. Just one to watch. I know he's been bowed. People have talked about him a lot. As an option, I just don't think he is a viable option at all, considering the other players here, considering his poor minutes and his XGI is pretty low there. The last one I haven't spoke about yet is Callum Hudson-Odoi. I'm a fan of this player as a footballer, and he's a very popular pick in this price bracket. But look at the chasm between every stat pretty much for Callum Hudson-Odoi and Anthony Elanga. I don't see why you would go with Hudson-Odoi over Elanga, because Hudson-Odoi loses in every stat there. So that includes actual output versus expected output. I think if Hudson-Odoi consistently played in a forward position and had 90 minutes every week, he'd be a consideration for me. But considering Elanga is always going to play in a forward position, has better expected minutes when he does starts, better stats, it's a no-brainer for me for now. So unless things change, I don't see why you would go with Hudson-Odoi over Elanga, and they're the same price. So I would say for me, Elanga is the best option here because he's the most proven and reliable option with fixtures to boot. Pereira is a close second with very similar attributes in terms of FPL anyway, but he has more set pieces, very similar fixtures for them both. And third is Minte, who is a bit of a punt, but probably has the highest upside if he does start firing and does get a lot of minutes. For me, it's Elanga or Pereira here. On to the 6.5 million midfielders. There's certain price brackets where there's absolutely no one. So, for example, 6 million, 8 million, 9 million, there's no one. There's not even anyone worth talking about. In certain cases, there's no one even priced at that point. So you won't see those come up. The 6.5 million we have. Shall we go from Garnacho first? And then we'll talk about the greens. Garnacho is a very young player. And when you have a young player in FPL or football, their potential to increase and improve their stats and their output as a footballer is high, right? Versus someone who, like a Jordan Ayew, who you don't expect to exceed their previous stats. So for Garnacho, his stats are pretty good here. I just worry for his expected minutes with threat from Rashford and Sancho down that side. But he's a very interesting pick. Quite kindly priced. I think he would have been more interesting at 6 million though. He's certainly an option at this price, but I just think there's better ones. Hwang, the reason that he's highlighted yellow, Hwang Hee-chan, is because of the fixtures. He has penalties in his lockers, but those fixtures are too horrid. Morgan Gibbs-White next. MGW, he's not the most disciplined player on the pitch, so getting a yellow or red wouldn't surprise me at all for Morgan Gibbs-White. His stats fall below Elanga's, and he's 1 million more than Elanga. However, look at his minutes, 88 minutes per start, and he starts most games, if not all of them, when he's fit. And he has penalties and set pieces. So you're basically saying, do you want to spend an extra 1 million on set pieces, penalties, and minutes, or save 1 million and have better open play stats? And that's up to you to decide. I think if they were the same price, I'd go with Morgan Gibbs-White, but they're not, and that 1 million goes a long way. You know, that's the difference between a 4 million defender and a Munoz, or a 4.5 million defender and a Porro, for example. Yeah. Szoboszlai is a very interesting one as well. I see a big improvement, much like I see an improvement for Garnacho coming, I see an improvement for Szoboszlai coming as well. He'll be playing in that number 10 role with little threat to his position, either in a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 for slot. I think he's one of the best picks outside of the green picks here. And they have lovely fixtures. Kudus is a quality footballer. As you can see from his output, he way outperforms what he's expected to, despite Moyes' inability to feed him chances properly. I don't like the fixtures for West Ham, and he's one to watch like Hwang. So I wouldn't bother with him for now. He's probably the weakest pick to start the season out of this lot. Okay, on to the greens then. I'm going to go bottom to top. Leon Bailey for Aston Villa. Get this. 23 90s if you equate the minutes. 23 90s. 10 goals, 11 assists. A goal involvement of 0.83. It's crazy. Okay. As you can see already, total minutes are an issue though. And this is not including all his many sub-appearances for Aston Villa. Even when he starts, he gets hooked very early. He's a great pick, but the first two fixtures and the worry of the minutes put me off for now. I think he is their star winger, but I worry that there's something there with regards to Emery's view of him being able to play every week or play 90s every week. And maybe that changes. If it does, that's very interesting, but he's one to watch for the first two. I wouldn't put you off just starting with him either. Nkunku is there, and as you can see, there is an asterisk next to his name because he doesn't have enough Premier League stats, Premier League data to go off. I'm not going to do it off 3 or 4 games last season. So what I've done is plucked the stats from RB Leipzig in the Bundesliga when he played there in his most recent season for them. So obviously with the asterisk and the fact that it's the Bundesliga to the Prem, stats are expected to drop off. But I don't expect them to drop off that much for him, to be honest with you, because arguably he's the best footballer, maybe even in the 7.5 bracket and downwards for midfielders, in terms of just a pure footballer. And his output is really good, as you can see. 0.84 goal involvement, really crazy stuff there. But the two starting fixtures are a worry for me. Man City at home, Wolves away is not great. And a new manager to boot with Chelsea's inconsistency throws too much uncertainty over for me. If you ignore all that and just focus on player qualities, the standout pick, but you can't ignore all that. Top of the list is Brennan Johnson for Spurs. The former Forest man has phenomenal stats, considering the fixtures as well. They make him my lead pick here. And they have Leicester, away, Everton at home. What is not to like? There is a little more of a worry over minutes for him as well, but as you can see, that's pretty consistent with most players here in this price bracket. I think if Spurs sign no one, then he's almost a lock in most of my drafts, really. If they sign Solanke, that will mean that Son will move to left wing, and that will put pressure on Brennan Johnson's right wing spot as well, because he'll be fighting with multiple players for that spot. Kulusevski, just to name one, for example. So I do worry for that if it happens. Also, if Richarlison stays, that could also mean reduced minutes as indirect result of that happening, with other players having to move into different positions. So do look out for transfer news with Spurs. Depending upon transfer news is how likely you should have Johnson in your team, okay? With no transfer news or Richarlison sold, looks like an incredible pick. And the other thing to look out for is preseason minutes. And Johnson, to my knowledge, has started every game. I think 4 out of 4 games for Big Ange in the preseason. I think he scored 1 or 2 as well. There's just nothing that much not to like, really. So there's a really nice price bracket, this, and there's loads of good options that are really viable. I would say for me, Johnson and Nkunku, Bailey, Gibbs-White, Szoboszlai are all very viable here. Players who aren't appearing on this, that I've seen in other FPL content creators' videos, which I don't quite understand why they've highlighted them over players like this. Bernardo Silva, massive minutes worry after his Euros ventures, and with Oscar Bob playing really well, Grealish coming back into contention, Foden playing, De Bruyne coming back. Also on the right wing, they have is Savio, the new signing. So I just wouldn't bother with Silva. Rodri, way too defensive, though he has very, very high quality output, but way too defensive. And then Rice is very similar to Rodri in that department, at least in terms of FPL. So I wouldn't bother with any of those. I just thought worth mentioning because I saw other people mention them, but they're just nowhere near this on stats, so I wouldn't bother. Next up is the 7 to 8 million bracket. There is actually no one in the 8 million bracket at all. So there's 2 7 millions and the rest are 7.5 here. You can see their prices listed for you here, as you will see on the next slide too for the premiums. Topping the list on stats, but bottoming out on expected minutes are the Liverpool duo of Diogo Jota and Luis Diaz. I worry for the minutes, and Szoboszlai is $1 million cheaper with much higher expected minutes playing in the 10 role. I would just go there if you're looking for a midfielder from Liverpool that isn't Salah to start the season. Diaz has struggled to match his output and hasn't done great for Liverpool since signing, though he has done very well for Colombia still. If Jota starts consistently, he looks very good. But it's been a long time in the Premier League since Diogo Jota started consistently. He struggles with injury, struggles with minutes. These are his minutes even when he starts. You can imagine how bad they are when I include substitute appearances as well. You've got to consider that Diogo Jota, Luis Diaz, Cody Gakpo, and Darwin Núñez are all competing for only 2 spots, because Szoboszlai and Salah aren't going to get rotated with these players, in my opinion, or at least very rarely. So it's just too much of a minutes worry for me. I wouldn't bother, though I can understand if people want to punt on it. I just wanted to include the stats. Eberechi Eze, the FPL man at the moment. You can see his stats are already incredible, even without penalty output included. He is on penalties, though, hence the blue highlight. In my opinion, the second best pick of this entire bracket. Also an interesting one to look out for with regards to transfer news as well. If he goes to Man City, he comes out of my team. If he goes to Spurs or stays at Palace, he's a lock in my team. He's probably a lock in my team. We'll see. We'll see. I have some reservations over Eze's fixtures to start the season and wonder whether there's potential for more points elsewhere, at least to start the season. But there's a reason he's very popular. Everything backs that up right now. If he goes to Man City, I worry about his minutes too much. But if he stays at Palace or moves to Spurs, incredible pick, really. Incredible pick. Brian Mbumo is another one that's interesting if there's transfer news. It looks like now, as of right now, the recording of this video, that Spurs are more likely to sign Solanke than Tony. There was a video released today of Tony returning to Brentford and everyone applauding him for some reason. It was like a Homelander scene. So I don't think he's going to leave this window. With Thiago out for 3 months, with that video. Sorry, I had to do a COVID cough there. With that video, which I know people might think I'm reading too much into, but that combined with Thiago being out and more rumours circulating surrounding Solanke to Spurs rather than Tony to Spurs, it looks likely that Tony stays and keeps penalties. If Tony leaves, Boomer becomes an incredible option. He's already a good option, but he could become an incredible option. These are non-penalty stats from Boomer. And that's what's interesting if that happens. But for now, he's a wait and see. He does have really nice fixtures though, Boomer. Anthony Gordon is arguably the standout pick here and my favourite pick. Due to his fixtures, due to his form last season, also how much he's fouled as well. He's a really strong pick. The only issue here for him is his away form. The only game he didn't start for Newcastle, he ended up coming off the bench because of an injury and playing 70 minutes anyway. So you can see he's highlighted in black his minutes, in bold, sorry. He's just a really good pick. So it's difficult to look past him, and I understand why he's in so many drafts. I personally would have him over Eze in my, if I can only pick one of them right now. And that's because of fixtures. Remember, Southampton at home for Gordon at the start versus Brentford away for Eze. Up next is Maddison, James Maddison. For me, because of his lack of consistent minutes under Big Ange, I don't like the pick. And the fact that Brennan Johnson has better stats at a cheaper price and is getting more minutes, and he's getting around about the same amount of minutes in preseason as well. I just don't think you need to go near Maddison whilst Brennan Johnson has, you know, if you check the stats, he's around about 50% better on expected goal involvement. Though I would say Maddison is more of an elite finisher and provider. Yeah, so I'm not going to put you off Maddison because of the 2 starting fixtures, but Son and Johnson for me are just better picks. He's an interesting differential though. Last one on the list is former Hull City star Jared Bowen. He's an elite finisher, consistent performer in the Premier League. I just worry about his fixtures. I also worry about Lopetegui as a manager for West Ham. The addition of the gap, Fulkrug from Dortmund to West Ham, will that affect his output as well, positively or negatively? There's too many question marks there. He's definitely a wait and watch, but he's nicely priced and he loves to play 90 minutes every week. As you can see, some of the best expected minutes per start of anyone on the entire midfield list. Okay, so he's a wait and see for me. Onto the slide that maybe a lot of you have been waiting for. It's the big boys. It is the premiums. And let's go from bottom to top. For me, the 8.5 bracket is too isolated away from everyone else. There's no one at 8 million, there's no one at 9 million, and there's only 2 picks 8.5. So picking from this bracket really means you're just picking Fernandes or Odegaard every week for the rest of the season. And I don't like that. I don't like their value either versus the value of some of the other players you just saw on the previous slide. So if you see 0.52, 0.40, 0.45, 0.47, there's players in this lower bracket here that have better output than that. So with better fixtures, there's just no need to have these 2 in your team. If I would have to choose one of these, I would choose Fernandes because he has the easiest starting fixture. Double fixture. And Fernandes has penalties. That's the only reason, 2 reasons. I think over the course of the season, Odegaard might outscore Fernandes, but at the start of the season, which is what we're playing for right now, I would go with Fernandes over Odegaard, but I wouldn't go near either of them. The price bracket is too isolated for them. Up next is Philip Walter Foden. I think if he was cheaper, it'd be more interesting. He has a bad first fixture. And he way overperformed last season, which is good to see. Obviously, you want to see finishing and output being really good, but a 0.85 versus a 0.59 expected, combined with going deep into the Euros, not being very good in the Euros, and probably not being fit enough for game week 1 due to fatigue, maybe even game week 2. I think he's just in a void right now. I will put him on the slide for my picks in the next slide, just to show you comparisons and fixtures. But for me, he's a warning. I wouldn't go there. So when I show him on my picks, just know that I'm putting him there as a comparison. He's the one I wouldn't include. Okay. Let's get the rest of the non-greens done. Cole Palmer at 10.5. Even without the penalty stats, and he will be on penalties to boost those stats. Those stats are very impressive. Very, very, very impressive. A 0.83 goal involvement is up there with Mo Salah for non-penalty goal involvement. I expect him to score big this season and be one of the best point scorers this season. But Christopher Nkunku is 4 million cheaper. Son and Saka with better fixtures at similar output are 500,000 cheaper. He has bad fixtures for the first 2. There's just better options right now, and there's even a better option in his team in terms of value as well. I'm not putting you off Cole Palmer, but I just don't think the value is there. If we could have unlimited funds, Palmer would be straight in my team, you know, as most would be on this page. I'd have a 5-man midfield, but we can't do that, and you've got to exclude people. You can't have every premium, and for me, Palmer is not as good as Salah, Son, or Saka to start the season. Last non-green on here is Kevin De Bruyne, and he tops the entire XGI chart here. You can see, though, only, if you look at the top of the chart there, under XG for De Bruyne, only 0.18 is from XG, and that's not what you want to see. You want to see very high XG. So he's always an incredible pick when he's fit, but that's the issue with De Bruyne. Is he going to be fit to start the season? Is he going to be playing 90 minutes every week? And also there's rumours surrounding his future. He's in a void from me, despite that second week against Ipswich. On to the greens then. So let's go from Saka first. Saka has penalties. He has a home game against Wolves to start. I do think he's being overlooked, but I can understand it given the other stats. If you just look at a straight up comparison between him and Son in terms of stats and fixtures, Son's the better pick, right? I think over the course of the season, Saka maybe has better longevity given his age and consistency to keep playing and the level of the team he's in. But I do think Son is the more elite finisher and goal scorer there. So with that, and much like with the Fernandes versus Odegaard situation, I think Son at the start of the season is the better pick. But Saka is very, very, very viable as a pick in your team to start this game. Sonny for me is the better option, as I said. Son Heung-min. First 2 games, elite finisher, elite player, should have won PFA Player of the Year a couple of years back when he way outperformed his stats. Yeah, it's just whether Spurs turn up basically for those first 2 games. You know, arguably the second best captaincy option in the first game week. So what's not to like for Son Heung-min? I think a lot of people are overlooking him. And that is understandable given that we have Brennan Johnson at 6.5. That's the big debate there. Lastly, but certainly not least, is the man above me. Sporting a new hairstyle, it's Mohamed Salah, the Egyptian. We know Mohamed Salah, right? He has some of the best stats in the league consistently over 4 or 5 seasons. Fantastic fixtures to kick off the season. The only issue is the price, right? 12.5 million is a lot of money. And there's also very slight question marks over his minutes at his age right now, and how he will fit in with Slot's utilization of him under a new manager, a new team. Yeah, if you can squeeze Salah in your team, it's the most obvious pick, and he's the best captaincy option for the first game week. So it's very difficult to look past him. It's just kind of, do you want, you know, the Haaland question alongside him? Okay, but maybe I'll do a separate video for Haaland and Salah. All right. These are my picks. I'm going to go through these fixtures first, then talk about them. So I'll show you this information after the fixtures, so no need to pause right now. Sorry, another COVID cough there. There's certain players on here, such as Foden, that I've included because I just want to show you the fixtures, because I know they're big considerations for people. I wouldn't go near Foden or De Bruyne because of their fitness and that first fixture as well. So I would avoid them. but they're there because, you know, I want to show Foden stats and I want to show the fixtures for Man City. Speaking of fixtures, here are the fixtures. Oh, here are the fixtures. Again, we'll go over the stats for these. The bad fixtures first. Minte at the top there for Brighton is an unknown quantity and has mixed, difficult fixtures to begin with, I would say. Everton away, Man United at home, Arsenal away, not the best, but then it does turn really good after that. Aston Villa's Bailey is my pick for Aston Villa. Rodgers, I suppose, for those of you wanting the 5 million bracket, I wouldn't bother at all there. And Chelsea's Cole Palmer and my pick, Christopher Nkunku, are next with a middling duo of fixtures to start the season, so you can potentially avoid all 4 assets there for the first 2 game weeks and just scout them. Philip, Walter Foden, and Kevin De Bruyne, Rodri or Silva, if you really want to go there, have a trip to the bridge. And then there'll be question marks surrounding pretty much all of their fitness for game week 1, hence why I just wouldn't bother. Brian Mbeumo is the last with the sort of middling fixtures, but he's sort of a step up. As you can see, 2 great fixtures in the first 3, but he also then, around that, has Liverpool away, Man City away, Tottenham away, very tough fixtures. But he's the type of player that can break away and score against those bigger teams. That's his style of play. But interestingly, a rotation pair with him or, for example, Pereira would have Palace at home for Mbeumo, Leicester at home for Pereira, Mbeumo and Pereira, Southampton and Ipswich, Pereira, West Ham at home, Pereira, Newcastle at home, Mbeumo, West Ham at home, then Wolves at home, Pereira, Aston Villa at home, Mbeumo, Ipswich at home, Brentford at home for Pereira, and similar ones for Minte as well. So if you really like depth in your squad, you could opt for that. I wouldn't personally, because I don't like rotating attackers, but it's just something to note there. The rest I haven't mentioned, quite simply, have great fixtures. So Saka, Eze, and Gordon probably coming next in terms of fixture quality. So Saka and Gordon both have 2 home fixtures in the first 3, with Gordon having newly promoted Southampton in the first game. Eze, I would say, has slightly worse fixtures. Brentford's not an easy place to go. They actually have really good home defensive stats. West Ham away is a good fixture. Chelsea away, a bit of a rough fixture. So that's why I'm thinking I have second thoughts about Eze, purely due to fixtures. Because you could look to pick him up in game week 4 instead, and then ship maybe Brennan Johnson out or Gordon out, for example. So yeah. Premiums here, so we have Salah and Son with their cheap counterparts, Szoboszlai and Johnson. So all 4 picks, they're very, very viable for me. Have an amazing opening 2 fixtures. Liverpool's fixtures are really good up until game week 9. They don't really have any bad attacking potential fixtures there up until game week 9. Spurs does take a turn for the worst in game week 3 and 4, but they arguably have the best opening 2. Alongside Liverpool. And then last but by no means least, I would argue that maybe Elanga and Pereira have the best fixtures on this list, but obviously they're maybe the weakest options because of the quality of the team and their individual output, but they're priced accordingly, right? So Elanga, Bournemouth at home, Southampton away, Wolves at home, really good fixtures. Pereira, Man United away, Leicester at home, Ipswich away, West Ham at home, Newcastle at home, again, really good fixtures. But the quality of the player and the team is a bit of a worry there. These are my stats then. So I'll go over my picks before we finish for today, and then my final thoughts on the midfield bracket. So my favourite picks right now, given the state of the transfer window, are Brennan Johnson, Anthony Gordon, Eberechi Eze, Christopher Nkunku, Anthony Elanga, and Pereira of Fulham, possibly in that order as well. Szoboszlai just misses out due to those middling stats. I do think that the premiums, if you can reach the premiums, seem a little obvious to me. So in terms of premium picks that are my favourite, Salah is obviously reigns supreme. If you can squeeze him in as well, he's the prime captain pick for the first game week. He even has a good captaincy option for the second game week. Son, for me, is the best 10 million option with that Leicester-Everton combo and an incredible 0.7 non-penalty XGI per game in the Premier League last season, and he consistently does it every season. Saka is closely followed to Son, for me, because he has those penalties as well, and he has a decent game week 1 fixture. I would say that Bailey and Mbumo potentially need things happening around them in their squad to become better options. Bailey because of his minutes, and Mbumo because of his requirement for penalties. That's ultimately the shortlist I'm picking from. I don't think you can go wrong with any combination of these. As I said, only the Man City assets I would avoid on here for now. I would probably also avoid Minte and just go for Elanga or Pereira for now in the 5.5 bracket. But everyone else on here, very, very viable. Son and Saka underneath Salah, of course, the 2 premium picks to choose from. And then you can look at someone like Palmer, who isn't on the list from game week 3 onwards, or a Man City player from game week 2 onwards if they are actually fit. Unfortunately, you can't have them all, and you need to pick picks from each bracket, right? I do think Nkunku's interesting because of his price, but the fixtures allow us to scout him at least, so we'll see what happens there. My final thoughts for midfielders: individual stats and quality are incredibly important for midfielders. Teams actually don't matter as much. What matters more is their individual output. Okay, goal scorers get you a lot more points, so look at that XG stat instead of just the XGI stat overall. Look out for penalty and set piece takers. I've highlighted all the blue ones, so you can see them very clearly in my video. Other set piece takers like Gibbs White taking all set pieces, Szoboszlai on some set pieces. Look out for those as well. Pay close attention to those 90-minute plus starters. Anyone in bold have started almost all games for their club. Anyone with high amount of minutes on those when they start do very well. I have given you warnings about certain players like Pereira and Elanga who might get hooked early though, like Minte. I don't recommend rotating attackers though. I've given you a few examples there. You end up benching a lot of points generally, but it is an option if you want big squad depth. But if you do rotate attackers, you're probably going with only one of Haaland or Salah. 3-4-3 and 3-5-2 are the best formations, so there's lots to pick here. You're either picking 4 or 5 playing midfielders from this bracket. Fixtures still matter a great deal, so you can target those relegation fodder sides and the weak defensive sides. I've highlighted a lot of those already in the fixture ticker that I created, and I changed it based upon expected goals against, expected goals conceded for those clubs away from home and at home. Price points are really important for flexibility here. So there's certain price points I've recommended completely avoiding because you can't escape them, or there's no one really around that price point. And I really think that's good advice for you to take on board for the new season, because if your 5.5 doesn't fire, there's loads of other options. If your 6.5 doesn't fire, there's loads of other options. If your 8.5 doesn't fire, there's only one option if you want to stick at that price bracket. I appreciate you can go all the way down, but then that takes 2 transfers to escape that, basically. Don't be fooled by non-Premier League stats as well. Remember, if they've got an asterisk next to them, it either wasn't this season or was in a completely different league. There's normally a drop-off. It's very rare that there isn't, unless their name's Luis Suarez or Cristiano Ronaldo, for example. It's very rare that there isn't a drop-off from those old stats. So whilst people will be impressed by Minte, will he consistently do that in the Premier League? I don't know. Will his minutes be as good? That's something else to consider for those sort of new players or players with low minutes is, will they play and start every game? Will they get 90 minutes every game? And finally, actual output, actual final output, finishing ability, creativity, quality of chances produced. These are really important things. So it's all right looking at expected stats, but go and watch some of these players play and understand their actual output versus what they're giving you in expected output as well. Okay? That is it from me. We've managed to keep it under 50 minutes. I had to re-record this whole video because late last night, after I uploaded, recorded, and did everything for the video, it turned out there was a strange alien buzzing noise coming out of my microphone for the entire video. And it looks like, according to my monitor here on the right for my microphone, not happening this time. So fingers crossed that's happened. Okay, if that's not happened, then we're all good to go. So I did re-record this full 50-minute video for your benefit so you don't get the buzzing. So I really hope you've enjoyed it. If you enjoy the videos, liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing really helped me out. Liking allowed you to save the video and come back for it as a bookmark for your own reference. I'm going to timestamp everything for you too. Upcoming is the forwards guide. I'm already well into creating that. after having to re-record this one. I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. We might do some rotation pairs too. I'm looking forward to all that and the start of the new season. Lots of different options. It's going to be awesome. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.